Hi, everybody. Today we're bringing you something from Witch Rising and the attack of the patriarchy. Now, this is going to be a little different because the patriarchy, in my opinion, is attacking my friend Reverend Don Lewis, most Reverend Don Lewis of the Correllian nativist tradition. And how they're doing it, and we've been fighting this AI battle, is that they are trying to make him the founder of the Correllian tradition, moving it back to the date of 1979 where he became uh, initiated as first priest, more or less,
Mm.
and the fact that he has done a lot of work. And so let's go ahead and let's before we go ahead and talk about the what they're doing to you. What did you do in the Correllian tradition that was so significant?
Well, the main thing that I did was standardize our teachings and materials. I took it from the old apprentice system form of instruction to an institutionalized form of instruction. I gave it a perhaps a greater cohesion than it had previously. And also, myself and people I worked with um, sought to extend our knowledge as far as we could, which I hope will continue long after I'm gone from this world. But the main thing that I did was create that standard form to take the oral apprentice system and create a written institutionalized system, which is very important. I think you see that in most religious movements at some point, and almost any religious movement you talk about, you'll find someone to say, "Oh, the early members were different in this way or that way," which is true. Before it became more institutionalized, they were certainly different. Uh, doesn't mean they wouldn't have agreed with it, but there certainly are differences in how people practice when they are in a small oral tradition versus a large institutionalized
And and we've talked about in other ones about how you felt when you became the first priest that you would be going out into the world. So you became a teacher, an organizer of practices and structures, and shared it with the world.
one. Yes.
But there was a number of people ahead of you.
Oh, yes.
And we're seeing a little bit of the Matilda effect where they're not being mentioned. And we were pushing really hard
Hmm.
with that, and we're starting to see some of that being corrected. But it started out making you, first of all, because you appear to be a white male.
Hmm.
And the truth is, you're of mixed blood.
Yes.
All of it American blood. You're a heritage. You're as heritage as you get.
Yeah. I mean, none of my ancestors are recent arrivals,
Mm-mm.
but my late mother was normally taken for being Hispanic, not for being white.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the fact that her name was Levita did not help anything. It tended to reinforce that point of view. She was not, of course, Hispanic. She was mixed European, Native American, a little bit of African. But um, I'm probably the first of my immediate lineage who would normally be thought of as being white.
And because of that, plus you've written the materials and everything else, you're appearing to the AIs
Hmm.
as the founder.
Yes.
And I think that is a patriarchal attack in the
Hmm.
sense of the algorithm is trying to restore this idea that a white male has to be the founder of this tradition,
Hmm.
not a carrier of the faith.
I think that is absolutely true, and not only in this instance, but throughout modern paganism. There are a number of prominent white males who are given the status of founders who themselves recognize that they were taught by women who are written out of the story. And I think that there is a cultural prejudice for having a male founder coming partly out of academia, and also tied to the idea that something does not exist until it first appears in a book. Um, and so the first person to write a book about it suddenly becomes the founder, even if you can show it goes back farther. And I think that that is hugely detrimental to our understanding of our origins and our history. It certainly is the case with me. I am not remotely the um, first of the first priesthood of the Correllian tradition. I want to say the fifth first priest in lineage. Lady Crystal was the fourth first priestess, and we built on the legacy of those previous people. I've often talked even about how each one of them changed the tradition over the years, and each one of them did. Um, but yeah, it's
But
very easy for people to say, "Oh, he wrote the big book. He founded all of it. Nothing goes back any farther."
and that's a sloppy thinking we're going to start seeing with a lot of leadership.
Hmm.
Dorothy Clutterbuck with Gardner, and we saw that, the argument around Richard Hutton and what he has to say, and what is the real history, as they're going to call it for it.
Well,
Um,
I mean, don't get me started on Ronald Hutton and Triumph of the Moon, because I could say a lot about that. But the main thing I will say,
mhm.
there's a huge attempt to say that Gerald Gardner was the sole founder um, of anything called Wicca, which is completely contrary to how that word was used for the first 25 years that it was commonly used, but also completely contrary to what Gardner himself said. And as far as Dorothy Clutterbuck goes, for years people tried to insist she never existed. Then when it was proven she existed, some of them tried to say, "Oh, but she was really a conservative Christian." But the truth of the matter, now that her diaries have been published, if you can read those diaries and not consider them a smoking gun, that she was exactly what Gardner said she was, I don't know what to say to you. You could take excerpts from those diaries, and they're not their writings are not really diaries in the normal sense. That it's mostly a collection of hymns and odes to different pagan deities, as well as poetry. But you could take them straight out of that manuscript, put them in a modern pagan magazine, and you would not necessarily realize it had not been written yesterday. Um, but the extent to which people have tried to erase this woman and replace her with uh, other figures in some cases, or just erase her altogether in others, is breathtaking. Um, and
So
it's part of the same movement.
and now,
Have a white male founder who creates everything out of nothing. That
so
apparently appeals very highly to academia.
and it seems to be a bias within the AI systems.
Hmm.
Now, some of the AI systems are putting the correct leadership,
Yes.
the founder, and that was not by accident, folks. We have worked hard to correct a lot of the material.
Hmm.
And we keep seeing this drift towards making you a founder
Hmm.
of that movement because you were the one who did the writings, because you're the
Hmm.
one who did it. And I guess there's no book, no solid single book of the family's tradition. There's still the older family tradition. It's very oral still.
Hmm.
Some photographs and materials, but is largely oral, and no one's really written down that history.
No.
And because of that, is that part of the reason you think we're seeing what they call the Matilda effect, where women are being written out?
Um, Not only in our tradition, but across the board, yes.
Talk
Going
about
back
that.
to Dorothy Clutterbuck for a moment. Um, she did not write down her adventures in witchcraft. Uh, it's only in those diaries that there's any direct evidence. Now, there is evidence of her presence in the occult community on a broader basis, but even
Hmm.
that took a long time to come out. Um, but in those days, people didn't write these things down. It was dangerous. Um, you did not. It in 1900, you would not be putting a pentagram on your tombstone. It simply would not have been happening. Why anyone is surprised it wasn't happening amazes me.
It's kind of like, so I think part of it's a perception problem.
Hmm.
It's like when you watch the old movies, say, around in the 60s, the horror movies,
Hmm.
and you go, okay, you're watching it, and she goes, picks up the phone, it's dead, the electricity, that sort of thing, and you go, why doesn't she just use her cell phone?
Hmm.
Is it
Yes,
real? You've talked about this
I have.
phenomenon,
Yes.
and do you think part of that is that we don't realize how dangerous it was to be a pagan at times?
I think for a lot of people that is true. The late Raven Grimaldi made an interesting statement in reference to Ronald Hutton and his characterization of Dorothy Clutterbuck. That Hutton had said that if she had actually been a pagan priestess, she would have to have lived the most elaborate double life imaginable. To which Raven Grimaldi replied, and I'm paraphrasing, "You mean like most modern pagans do?" Um, but a lot of people today, because that was 30 years ago, are accustomed to being more public. And they don't necessarily realize it wasn't that long ago, most of us could not be that. And when you could not be that, you were not that. One of the things I like to complain about is the meme that goes around talking about how the poster misses the good old days, and now because Becky can buy sage at Whole Foods, she thinks she's a witch. Um, which always tells me the poster doesn't remember the good old days because we would have loved to be able to buy metaphysical supplies in convenient places. Um, Back in those days, you could find them, but they were a lot harder to find. People were not as open. They were often not open at all. And I think a lot of younger people don't understand that. So they look and they see um, examples of people who were, in fact, leading double lives. Um, and it doesn't make sense to them because they haven't had to do that. I think I think perhaps if you come out of the LGBTQ community, you might understand it a little better because there's that same experience of having to present one face to the world in earlier times. But that was true among people who were following non-Christian spiritualities. They generally could not afford to be public. Therefore, they didn't leave all of this information um, that you might expect. And you have to look at what is there to try to understand it. And it's amazing how often what is there really pretty clear and still gets swept away anyway. Um,
So let's talk about this very specifically. How do we prevent the Correllian tradition from being created in the image of all the other traditions of you as a dominant male,
mhm.
of the other tradition who wrote and everything else, and the erasure or the kind of the push aside the accomplishments of all the people who come here in
Well,
the
we need
world
to
that
maintain
is AI,
the
right?
memory. Hmm?
In the world that is AI,
Well,
right?
yeah. Well, we need to maintain and continue to represent the memory of our actual history, of our ancestors, and not let that fade from view. I think one of the problems that certain other traditions had is that they did not have the aspect of ancestral veneration that has been part of Correllianism throughout its history. And consequently, they in many cases simply forgot about even very recent ancestors sometimes. I mean, the number of people who are not well remembered, who I knew personally, is amazing.
And so one of your answers is going to be is that we need a center. Correllian for you, it's a Correllian center, a Correllian campus.
That's part of an answer, yes.
And well, I can
And the
see
thing that makes it
statues.
part of this answer, it's a place to teach, a place to keep these memories alive.
So you talked about one more idea of
Okay.
potentially in of what makes things important, what makes
Hmm.
things that pass history, and that is art.
Yes.
You talk more about how sculpture and paintings and all of that. will convey for much longer time
Hmm.
than the written word.
Well, I'm of the point of view, and I wrote it in the first degree lessons because I thought it was that important to have stated up front that the use of artistic depiction is a better way of teaching sometimes than writing for a variety of reasons, including the fact that you can communicate on more levels at once and involve more. It's a less passive way of learning. If you look at the great sculptures and paintings um, of antiquity and from around the world, they can be used for instruction on many levels. So that's part of why I feel that. The other part is, of course, people will work to preserve their art and their physical history, um, sometimes when they're not working for anything else, because it is something they treasure. Um, if you look, I don't remember where it was, but the other day I saw a posting about the Black Madonna from Central Europe. I think it was from Central Europe. Might have been the one from France. But the thing that I would say about that sculpture is by looking at that sculpture and studying it, you can understand things about the Christian religion that most modern Christians don't remember. Because you ask your average modern Christian, well, who is the Black Madonna? What does that represent? They probably don't even know it exists. It was once a very important part of that religion. The artwork preserves it. Um, if you look at any number of, let us say Hindu sculptures, Hindu paintings, East Asian sculptures and paintings representing religious ideas, they can convey those ideas a lot faster than the written word can do. Yes, you may want to refine it with the written word, but there's a power in art that is only rarely present in the written word. So I'm a great believer in using art to define yourself, to define your positions, to define your community. And not only in the sense of like paintings and drawings, which I've done thousands of throughout my career, but also things like architecture. Architecture can be extremely important in a communal identity. If we look at the pagan community at present, there is no prevailing architectural form. Certain branches of paganism might be able to say otherwise, but there's certainly nothing overarching. But if you look at many other religious movements, you can recognize their temple by what it looks like. It has been institutionalized um, in a particular form, which usually also encapsulates the beliefs that go with it. Um, and I think this is something that we don't think about nearly enough, partly because most of us are not in a position to have independent temples at this time. But I think that building this is very important for the future. I think that without it, we're likely to find ourselves leaves on the wind.
I think that you summed it up beautifully. So, folks, watch the algorithms. Make sure that your information, if you want to be a part of the
Hmm.
future in a correct way, you need to get it into the corrected. You need to have all your people corrected. You need to ask the chat GPT if you think it's worthless, if you think it's not necessary, you think it's going to eat energy, fine. I mean, I'm not going to argue against those who don't want to use it. But for those of you in the future who want to have a true statement, then you need to go ahead and pay attention.
Well, that's
Otherwise,
that's the thing, because this is the technique that is now being used to preserve knowledge. And it's like people love to complain about the burning of the Library of Alexandria and the loss of so much knowledge from antiquity. The reason is that only certain books were preserved. Only certain things are going to be preserved, and a lot of them will be preserved through AI. If you're not using it, it won't be preserved.
And there you go. So, folks, if you get into so here, folks, I want you to do me a favor. Go into ChatGPT, ask who is the founder of the Correllian tradition, and get me your results. And our goal is, and if it is not, and who is it that is the founder of the Correllian tradition?
Caroline High Corral.
If it says anything else than that, report it and say Correllian High Corral. We need everyone to do this to continue so that we do not have a patriarch moment where in a generation or two they go, oh no, the Correllian tradition was started by Don Lewis. We do
Yeah.
not want this to fade into the future because that's what it does, isn't it? It's not today that everyone's going to agree while you're alive. It's going to be when you have passed, and there's a value in that death to make you into the founder.
Mm. Yeah.
Pagans must think into the deep future because it's the only thing we've ever done.
Yes.
So thank you, folks. There'll be more, but watch it. Pat, if you want to see it live, the Matilda effect inside the Correllian tradition by the AIs. Watch what them try to make Don Lewis a founder and not all those lovely people who came before for almost 100 years. Don't let them wipe out our history. All right, folks, we'll be back with more historical moments this year. And if you see anything, let me know.